two kids, it's like you gotta be laser focused in the studio and get into that flow state, and then get in, get out, like, and have to have like a 3 hour chunk of time to get anything worthwhile done.
Yeah, no,
And that's the whole point of these cards. It's like get into a flow state quickly, get something pure, get something done. It's really like work on one thing in a day instead of trying to do 30 things, which is that's always the hard part. Like when I come back from shows, like I got 3 shows this week, and I'll come back and I'll be all spun around, and it's like, okay, what do I need to focus on? Just let's get this one song done instead of tinkering at 5 songs.
Yeah. It's tricky. I found myself wasting away the morning because I downloaded. Have you messed around with Phase Plant?
Love it. I just saw those guys at NAMM. Yeah.
Oh man. Well, and they just launched V2, so they have a sale. This is also, it's not an ad, but everyone should know it's $100 for this synth, and it's amazing. It does all the same stuff that other synths do, plus really creative ways of like, I don't know, the routing, and it can do a lot of interesting stuff. And the factory sound bank is awesome.
You gotta have a good computer though. You need a beefy computer to push that beat. At least they said that the new update's a little more efficient, but I gotta get that new Mac Studio or the new tower. I was waiting for the tower announcement.
I know, at WWDC, and it didn't.
Oh, what a buzzkill! We got like a new lock screen instead.
Right.
They're like they're good with that. They're good with the lock screen. What was the last tower was a while ago, right?
Yeah.
Remember that? Did you guys buy one of those for the studio?
The
circle.
Cheese grater? The cheese grater we did have.
Yeah.
Cheese grater. Was that the Apple? Was that Intel? The Intel one?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. 2010 and before-ish, something like that, right?
I 2013
is when the trash can came out. I want to say.
Yeah.
Right. I have the trash can. I'm glad I didn't buy that new, like, what was it, like Reed Stefan bought that tower, that huge one that was modular. But it's all Intel. And now I'm like, oh my God, that's like 15
Right before
grand.
they made the switch, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, I have an iMac that I work off of, and it was right before they made the switch. And it was like, ugh. Now I'm like, I don't update the operating system, so I'm still on, I don't know. We don't need to get into it.
Yeah. Tech support, it's like being able to diagnose all these technical things. It's the new thing now.
Yeah.
Like I feel like actually now everything is so stable with Monterey and my trash can. I'm getting ready for everything to crash and plugins to blow up in the next Mac Studio and the next computer.
It's a major undertaking when you switch and reauthorizing all your plugins and getting everything set up the right way. I was gonna say, so like you were saying, a lot of times you need like a 3-hour block to really focus and get stuff done. How do you sort of like split up your creative time and your focused constructive time? Like do you allow yourself to just experiment without any sort of like specific goal, or do you not really have the time to do that as much these days?
Yeah, that's really important. I think I do draft days where I'm like, let's just get a beat, chord progression, lead, bass line, add additional percussion, kind of leave out the window dressing, like the risers and the builds.
Yeah.
And then I try to do that in a day or half a day, and I collect those, and those become instrumentals for I'll send over to vocalists. I'll mute the leads and maybe filter things down, but those are important because you don't sit down and just say, hey, I'm going to make a hit record today. Like you kind of wing it, right? You get into a creative state, and maybe some people are a little more intentional, but I get into the studio and I have to keep flexing that muscle and keep working. And it gets a little more tedious when you're doing long distance collabs, but I think those have been really fun to kind of be able to hear things with fresh ears. So working with younger producers that I admire, like guys whose tracks I play on the show, and there's always, every year there's like 6 new 19-year-old producers that just have incredible mix downs, and they blow up immediately, and you're like, cool, well maybe I'll just work with them, hire someone who's better at doing the drops or doing this kind of production, and hire your weaknesses.
Yeah, we preach that all the time, just so you're not like stuck in those weeds trying to do things that you're not good at, and it just becomes inefficient and a waste of time.
And you hear it too many times. Right?
What's that?
If I hear it too many times, I'm screwed. Like I can't see the forest for the trees. And then some tracks I can take start to finish, and if it's fast enough, I'll do the mixing and mastering, and it's fine and it's great. But like it worked well for that tempo and that key. But then every song's a puzzle that you've got to crack.
Yeah.
I don't know for you guys if you have the same process, but if it's a different key and there's a different tempo, a different space between the notes, density of production. Like, is it vocal or no vocal? It changes everything.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
do you
very
find
much so.
yourself always like usually pulling in somebody to tackle some stuff in a record, even if it's going to be like a solo record? Do you usually bring somebody in to like, I can't nail this one thing? Is that more common than not?
It depends. Like the record I did for Tiesto's label with Lights was just
Mhm.
me and Lights, and it was so pure. There was no production partner, and I think I know we had Wired to do like a final touch up of the master, but I always feel like when I send it to mastering that it's not like it's just like almost a little bit quieter, and I'm like, you want to see your vision through,
Mhm.
but unless you're like really lost in the mix. So sometimes I'll have someone else do that final stem mastering, and then sometimes a song that just it hasn't found the right framework yet. Maybe the sound design needs improvement, and someone else could come in with fresh ears. But because you can kind of get married to your lead or your kick drum, or and then you gotta step away and refresh your ears, let it incubate for a little bit.
Yeah, and it can be tough
Tough.
because sometimes you have to step away from it, work on a few other projects, and it can be a month or two before you can come back to it with any sort of fresh perspective. And in that
Yeah,
case, it's probably easier and quicker to just get someone else involved that already has
yeah.
that fresh perspective.
Even
I
if it
totally
is a
agree.
little bit of micromanaging and legwork with email, like I kind of miss. I haven't done any in studio sessions since the pandemic, and I got to get back to that.
Mm.
Like, I'm gonna get Nadia Ali's gonna come track vocals soon, and
Oh, awesome.
but
Nice.
I miss that tracking the vocalist over my shoulder. I don't use a vocal booth, and
Hmm.
that's how I did In the Air. That's how I did Longest Road. Like I literally would just loop a song, an instrumental that I made 5 times, leave the room and go get some coffee, come back, and then chop the hell out of the vocals and find the
Nice.
hooks.
Nadia mentioned that you guys were going to be working together a few weeks ago. She was on another live stream that I do called Dope or Nope, and
Yeah,
she's coming on here in a couple of weeks too. I'm psyched to see where her head's been at on music and kind of like what she's gonna like dive into now that she's reapproaching everything. It's gonna be
yeah. She
exciting.
took a little break and had a kid.
Yep.
Um, but it's like her vocals are just so amazing. There's a song we've been working on for about 10 years. It's like we're not consecutively 10 years, but like
You're right.
kind of goes in the back burner, and then she's like, I want a more minimal version, and I want a future rave version. Like we compete for ideas in this track and like what's the best way to present it. That's always
Nice.
hard, right? I mean, do you guys ever struggle with that where you have a song and you're like, oh, it could be really cool with this kind of club mix? And I
Yep.
guess you just do your club mix and you do your Spotify, your radio mix.
We've toyed with that. Usually that happens when there's an A&R in the mix, throwing ideas out, and then we don't mind entertaining those ideas. We'll dive into a few different options. I could think of a few specific examples where we did like multiple takes of a record, but sometimes it becomes like diminishing returns where you're
Yeah,
like,
just different.
yeah, both versions are good in their own way, and like you want to position the record as best you can for success, but you don't really know which version's going to be the one that is going to resonate. Sometimes it's been awesome that we've done it and it worked really well, and other times it's a crapshoot. So it's like, you
Yeah,
know,
I worry about the falling into just collecting opinions. Like,
yeah,
it's easy that you could send it to your managers and your team, and it's like, you're not going to vote on it. That's not really how it works. I mean, I guess
Yeah.
you leave it up once you put it out. I think you just have to be humble, right? Like, you don't know what's going to blow up, and sometimes you can guess and you have a good feeling. Like I remember when Avicii's manager sent over "Wake Me Up" early on. I was like, "Oh, this feels good. Like this is nice. Like I really like this record." I didn't know. Oh my God, this is going to be a
the
massive
biggest.
hit.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
sometimes but usually that's like an Adele track or something where they're all going to be huge hits anyways. But you never know, right? And you just gotta like serve the song and trust your
Yeah, I
instincts.
mean, we always give feedback on this stream, and like we always encourage guys to, especially up and comers, like drop links and we'll give you feedback. But in the same sentence, I'm always like, just take it with a grain of salt. Like, yeah, we might have more experience, but like we don't have a crystal ball. What you did might be totally fine, unless it's just like, not there, obviously not there. But like, if it's kind of on par with everything else, we'll give you our opinion and maybe things we would change. But at the end of the day, it's just an opinion. So like, the audience decides what's gonna work, and like, unfortunately, still have to deal with a lot of gatekeeping and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
that can get frustrating too. Like you might change a record till you're blue in the face, and then like whoever at whatever platform might say like, not for me. So,
Right, it might lose the soul of the record. It just
Yeah.
it mutates. I found that records will just evolve or devolve. Usually it devolves and it turns into something else, and you're like, well, it's different but not better. And then I think the hard part is early on you get goosebumps. Like my goal is always to try and give myself goosebumps in the studio, which is a tough, a tough goal to achieve every single time with every song or remix. But
Yeah.
once you've heard it that many times, you're not getting the dopamine rush. Like the drugs wear off in the studio, the natural drugs. So like that's when the work kicks in. I feel like when you've heard it that many times and you're not getting the goosebumps because you can't. It wouldn't give you the same effect over and over.
Yeah.
How involved on the business side are you?
Man,
Just generally with your brand. Okay, I guess starting from the beginning till now, like what's changed? How involved are you now versus how were you before? I'm just curious about all that stuff because you've had a long, successful run.
yeah.
And I feel like you're pretty dialed in.
I try to have like a macro perspective on things, like a zoom out. Like I'm not somebody that's in like digging into the contracts and changing the clauses like on that side of business things. But I think I just always want to be a reliable source. I have like lots of quality music that's consistent. I think that's kind of what I've been known for is consistency with the music, and I try not to chase trends. You do have to adapt and move. Like I love the future rave sound now, and I love adding little elements of that. But I think to me, it's just been about having a good team around me and finding good collaborators that complement my sound. And I think what happens, a lot of guys shoot themselves in the foot, in terms of longevity. They say, I'm not going to play unless it's $30,000 for a show, or, like you have to be flexible with promoters in different markets. And as the markets change, so just having these long working relationships with producers and promoters and not pricing yourself out. Like I think there's a lot of DJs I know that have said, I'm not going to play soft ticket club shows. I'm only going to do festivals. And it's like, good luck with that. Like, how are you going to keep building your markets up?
Yeah.
Right.
So I think you gotta check your ego, and sometimes you have to take a pay cut in certain markets where maybe you don't have the same ticket draw, and that's been helpful. And then you can rebuild and get back to, the tier you want to be at. It just takes a little time.
Yeah, because do you find that you've gone through sort of waves throughout your career? Because we certainly have where, like, I don't know, maybe a song comes out that really connects, but then it's hard to follow that up, so it dips down a little bit, but it comes back up. Like, just getting used to that sort of natural cycle that happens throughout your career.
Yeah, it's going to be a zigzag no matter what. And I think some guys, they get shot out of a cannon and they have this breakout single and they don't have anything to follow. Like they're not ready. It's not about having one breakout song. It's about having a series of songs. It's like a company releasing one product. It's not a company. It's just as a product. So you got to have a whole suite of things that you're offering. And I think, there's new pressures now with you have to be present everywhere with social media and things like that. But that's part of the game. Like staying on top of people's minds, top of mind awareness. But yeah, I don't get like super dialed into the business mode. I love to reach out to brands. Like that's been a fun part of this. Like during the pandemic, I reached out to Blackmagic Design and they sent me some gear to use for the stream. And even lens companies, I started reaching out and saying like, oh, I love this lens and I'll feature it on the stream. So I would do a lot of bartering. So I love outreach. That part I love. I hate contracts. That makes my blood boil. I don't. It's just agents grinding each other. It's just a squirrely business. I don't like it. I let someone else do that who's a little more even keeled, and I think as artists we're a little more sensitive. So I try to stay focused on the creative things, but I love when I can talk to brands and they'll send me gear to use and it just aligns with the show. And like wine has been a thing like we touched on earlier. Like that's been fun to bring in other passions. So it's not just like I'm another random DJ doing a stream. It's like we focus on really cool, high-ends, amazing wine and great new music, fun visuals. It's bringing together different worlds into something that's a unique combo.
I promise we're not going to talk about a wine chat right now, but while we're on the topic, I ironically went to a really good wine tasting last night. This vineyard called Avianesi. It's the biggest biodynamic vineyard, I think, in the world, but it's in Montepulciano. Anyway, if you're not familiar with the brand, it's called Avianesi.
Avianesi,
That's the producer, so you should check them out. It's really good. Great value.
I started to reach out to different wine companies. It was like, send me your, a lot of them are so
Send me a
small. They
case.
can't. Yeah, yeah. It's like, I just need a bottle. You can afford a bottle, right? Like it's not like a big influencer campaign.
Nice.
But the bottle
That's
like
awesome.
spins on the show for about an hour, so it's pretty good exposure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And so how many of your fans have kind of resonated? Has that like whole topic resonated with?
It's been fun. I think people are probably a little tired of the same old bottle service concept at clubs and things. Maybe we'll work the wine thing into clubs, but it's been fun. People drink along. We've done some Zooms with the diehard supporters with Patreon, and I think the next step is probably doing a live stream from a vineyard. We've been talking to a couple places, but
Nice.
it's a big production to get the streams together. To do the remote ones, it's like so much planning.
Yeah.
It's a lot to undertake, but no, the wine thing actually worked perfectly because people would cast the stream to their TV in their kitchen or in their living room, and wine was a big part of surviving the pandemic and staying sane, especially if you had kids. So
Yes.
that was a fun part.
That's awesome. It's just nobody else has really taken it in our space, obviously, like in dance music, nobody's done anything like that. So it's cool that you've kind of, like you said, brought in other passions and stuff. And expose them to your audience. So typically, we were on StreamYard. Now we're on Reach. Big shout out to the Reach team for working through the kinks with us and everything. But typically, we have segments that we do on the show where we bring up like a prompt. But I do want to throw you into one anyway. I'll just pose it as a question. Has there been a specific... It's called Nightmare Story is the typical segment. But has there been like a specific nightmare story in the business or creatively that you've worked through that might be a good lesson for up-and-comers watching to avoid?
Oh man, how many? I got so
Yeah.
many I could share.
I'm sure.
You can reserve names too, by the
Yeah,
way,
yeah.
if you need to.
I think the main thing that's always the craziest thing that sticks out to me is like having a computer crash at Coachella, like not being prepared. That's pretty easy to fix. I mean, that was a long time ago when I played, and it was a time when SSDs weren't that cheap, so I had like a regular hard drive in there. But I think it's good to try to maybe have that experience before you're playing at Coachella, or like I had it happen at Dodger Stadium. I don't think anyone noticed. Like the computer crashed, and it was like I was doing the first pitch for the Dodgers, and I had to play a set on top of the dugout. And I had to play with a PC for the first time. So I was like, I had Ableton on a PC. I was like, hope this works out okay. It's like you don't want like the paperclip to appear and tell you the computer's crashing. Like, I'm definitely a Mac guy, but yeah, I think you got to get some of those failures in early before the stakes are high, and really have your computer optimized if you're playing live. But I think you got to expect. It's almost like Murphy's Law, expect that things aren't going to be perfect, and especially if you're playing in the desert, if you're playing in Vegas at a pool party. Be ready for that stuff to happen, and like what would you do, kind of think out ahead of time, what would you do if your computer overheats, and what can you do before that happens, because in the moment you're not going to know what to do.
Yeah.
And it happens all the time. Like there's so much DJ gear. The joke I heard recently was like the first 20 minutes of DJing is finding out what's broken, like what hot cues aren't working, what cue and play buttons. Like I played at Burning Man once, and the cue and the play buttons were broken. So I'm like, how am I going to play my set? All the dust had
Wow.
settled in, so that there
Yeah.
was no travel between the buttons. So it's like, what do you do? So I played the whole set on hot cues. I had to improvise. Thank God I was ready. I had the songs mapped out.
Yeah.
So
That is
Wow.
a professional move right there.
yeah. And there's some interesting stuff happening right now. Like I can't say too much about it, but there's somebody, in terms of like, I don't know how I would act differently in this situation, but somebody has covered In the Air, and they've done a version, and now it's a soccer chant, and it's like blowing up in Europe, and there's almost nothing we can do about it. They've retitled it. It's a cover, but they've retitled it called I'm Feeling It. So Mark McCabe and Sunset Brothers, they did a cool mashup. So, but now it's coming out on all these major labels, and like I think Republic is pushing it out right now. So it's interesting. It's like in a situation like this, do you go after this? Like they didn't, like they put their names as writers, like it wasn't properly released, or do you take advantage of the situation and use the momentum? Like it's very hard for a song to get momentum. So, I mean, there's these.
Did you
like,
did the team hit them up yet to see like to getting it amended and fixed?
Yeah, they're like, yeah, let's make this right, because it's not properly titled and registered. The publishing's all screwed up, but it's getting crazy play. It's become the anthem for this soccer team in Scotland. and it's really bizarre. They resung it, so it's a new master. They had but the vocals, it's nowhere near the original.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting. Like your knee jerk reaction in a lot of situations is to get angry, or like the singer Angela is really upset about this. And there's not a lot you can do with the covers. They're like the biggest loophole in the industry. It's like you can get sued for sampling a snare drum, but if you cover the entire song note for note, you can release it and keep the master. It's crazy.
Yeah,
it is
and do
pretty
well on
crazy.
streaming.
And like the more I've been learning about it, the crazier and more disorganized it seems, because every country has different laws around it.
Yeah.
And so, like, we've dealt with covers that we've just done and put out, and it's fine for streaming and everything. But then we've heard of other guys that do the same thing, and then if they go to radio with the record, you can issue a takedown depending on the country, but also depending on like how the writers feel about the record. So somebody just needs to create like a really streamlined way to I don't know, fix that whole situation worldwide.
Yeah, like
it's a disaster.
It's weird that you play a song on YouTube and your stream gets taken down, but a covered song is just like fair game, because I think, I don't know, it's more biased towards the labels than the songwriters. But that's just the way the system is right now in terms of like equity. But I think, I mean, really to answer like your main point though, it's like you can look at is a scenario a nightmare situation, or is it an opportunity? Like every crisis can be leveraged in a different way, and I think it's really cool when songs get attention. But yeah, we're not sure what to do with this current situation. Like Conor McGregor's using "In the Air" as his training song, but he knows this new version. Yeah,
right.
I mean,
that is so bizarre. Yeah.
If you're looking for opinions, what I would do is create basically the same thing as the cover, re-release it like you guys put it out, and then also have them fix everything going on with that song, or just have them add you and the writers, like amend all that publishing so it's fixed, but also like add you to the billing.
Right. Yeah,
That'd
some
be
credit.
ideal.
I think,
yeah, sure.
I think the rub has been that Angela McCluskey is from Scotland, so it's a Scottish football team.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why she's
even more offended.
Oh
Yeah.
my God, can you imagine that? Like, because
Right.
it's being played in every bar and club in Scotland as this anthem, and at the stadiums. I'll send you guys the TikTok. It's hilarious. But.
Please.
Yeah, we gotta see that.
That is a really unique scenario, but I feel like it's plausible to happen to any artist now, especially with like TikTok covers, Spotify playlists just dedicated to covers. I know for one, like Sunday mornings, I throw on this acoustic cover playlist, but it's just hip hop records, like sung by guys that you'd hear in like, I don't know, a Nashville pub covering like Biggie on guitar.
Really?
It's
yeah.
fantastic. They're singing the lyrics. It's great. But like that's a thing, and those artists have like millions of streams. Mm-hmm. So then what happens on the other side of those records if that artist didn't want that covered or whatever is really what
it's like they have no say.
Up.
Like you're supposed to clear it, but yeah, like this cover version, it's got 25 million plays on Spotify, and but it's funny. I don't know what made it take off to be a soccer chant right now, like because this came out in 2017. This cover came out. Now it's just like, well, I guess TikTok is working then,
Right. Yeah, that is so, like, that's got to be so surreal that a track that you released, was that in like 2008 originally?
When was it? 2012. Yeah, In the Air came out 2012 or 2013.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a while back. Yeah.
Yeah, to have like, well, and I mean you've had similar thing with Longest Road too, because that's probably the one I was thinking of that was 2008, right. But just continues. It's sort of, both of those have just entered that like classic melody pantheon of like, I don't know, Swedish House Mafia, Avicii. That's got to be such an interesting thing. Like, was there a moment when you realized that those were records that were just going to live sort of forever?
You don't know at the time, like you never have that perspective on the arc of a song. But I think there was a time in Miami when a song would take over the conference, and that was one of those years, and it was crazy. I mean, it was the Deadmau5 mix that blew up, but it was it just took over, and I kept hearing it in like little bodegas and stores, and I'd walk into like 4 different clubs during the course of the day in the Winter Music Conference, and it would be playing in every club. And I feel like now it's way more like dispersed. You know, there's so much different stuff. Artists playing more of their own material, But I don't know if it's like there are songs that blow up at the conference, but it used to be like there'd be like one or two that would be the standouts, right?
Yeah.
What did you ever, because I know for us at least in the beginning, if a remix of our record blew up, it wasn't as satisfying as like the original song blowing up. But then like we realized, oh well, this is just a catalyst for we're gaining so many more fans.
Yeah.
Because that did really well, and it's with another artist, so we're tapping into their fan base. And again, it goes back to your point of like, it's an opportunity for other things to happen for our brand. But like, did you ever view that song blowing up in that way where you were like, damn, I know this is awesome, but it's not the original?
I think initially, and then because also I remember like Dead Mouse's manager at the time saying, this is a little more of like his thing now, and I was like, what? Like, people will try to discount you in your career, and you have to kind of ignore that and check your ego and just say like, well, I have the publishing on this, so it's like that. It worked out just fine, and it helped me create a touring career on that. That was like, now you have permission to tour.
Yeah.
So, and you have to have those tipping points. I think especially now. I don't know if they last as long, the tipping points, in terms of a song getting peak popularity, but I think it was always bittersweet with remixes initially, and then I've totally for years I've just been like totally embracing it. Like, I love it. Like, let someone just breathe some new life into it, and we'll see what happens. But it's funny, labels like both Spin and Armada are like, let's do less remixes now.
Yeah.
Because they're seeing less playlist. The playlists are saying they don't want to hear remixes as much. Which is crazy. Like, but I get it. Like, it's more work for them, like more stuff to sift through.
Yeah. And there's already so much music coming out that if every release then has 3 remixes attached to it, that's 4 times the music, whatever, 3 times the music. So I can understand that.
Yeah.
Have you ever been on the flip side where you had like a remix that really blew up? And like, how do you treat that? Because a lot of times, like, say you do a pop remix, you did one for, was it Ava Max?
Ava Max, yeah.
Yeah.
So that was a funny scenario. Yeah.
How does that work in terms of like, because then you have all these new people that are aware of you, but they may not necessarily be super into dance music, or have you found that converts into fans that stick around?
Well, it's really interesting too, because you get your flat fee as a remixer, and then you don't know which remixes are going to blow up or not. But that has like 45 million plays.
Yeah,
so they've made a lot of money on that remix, and that I'm never going to see. But it's fine. Like, but it is funny. It gets added to like workout playlists, and you get that casual fan. Well, I remember when Longest Road came out, people were loyal to the song, but didn't know the artist. They thought I was the singer. They thought Morgan Page was the singer because it sounded like a girl's name. It's interesting how people can do insanely well in streaming and do terrible in ticketing because they don't have a brand presence or maybe some other factor. So I think that's part of the business, right? Like learning to connect the dots with the fans, and maybe people are discovering your music on Peloton. I even find stuff and I'll like mark it on Peloton that I'm gonna add.
We've gotten tagged in a lot of that stuff, like where trainers are using a record. Usually the spinning stuff does really well on Peloton or whatever. They must push into that quite a bit. But we've got tagged in a lot of that. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, that's been really cool. The other thing I wanted to ask you about is like, so I should mention on the remix side, like something we've been doing a lot more is like, we'll get a fee, but we'll also ask for some back end. And sometimes it's tough, sometimes it's impossible, but like we definitely ask for that. But in turn, we also offer like some promotion of the record that normally we wouldn't do. So like we'll tap into our own label resources to help, I don't know, leverage playlists and stuff that we're tied in with to help them get the remix off the ground, especially if we're tied in on the back end. So it's kind of a win for both parties.
But that's also, we're talking independent artists.
Mostly
which is a very different
artists.
thing than working with major labels and doing like pop remix stuff.
For sure. But a lot of the guys watching are like emerging artists, and it's a good, like if you can't get the fee, ask for like a little piece of the action on the remix, and I feel like that's a good way to break in.
I always thought it was weird as a remixer, you're adding hooks, you're adding new elements. I always thought it was weird you can't really ask for writing credit, but you can. In certain situations, if somebody doesn't have the budget, like early on I would do that. I'd say like, can you give me writing credit if we have no advance? Give me some points on the record. just throw it out there, and you never know what you'll get. But like I think that's the key, is like working with everybody and being flexible, not getting taken advantage of, but being willing to be flexible and not being overly precious.
This comment is just too funny not to read. Shout out to Moniker on Twitch. Is this Finish My Track or Animal Planet? All I see is 3 goats. Thank you. That's hilarious.
Clever.
So one thing we did recently, real quick, I just want to finish
yeah.
this thought and get it out of my brain. One thing we did on the remix front recently, and it's coming out soon, is we've been doing a lot of music NFTs on Record Shop, and we did an original version of a record in the NFT drop, and then the remix is going to come out on DSPs. So like the original version doesn't live anywhere on Spotify or Apple or anything, but the remix will. So it'll just be interesting to see like what the overlap is, if the collectors enjoy that in the same way, but just a different type of strategy altogether.
So you embrace the whole NFT thing. Like, what do you think of Royale and the stuff Blau's doing?
I love it all. Like, I think all of it has a place. Of course, like in anything like this, you get speculators, you get flippers, you get people, and some of them are also dance music fans. So like we have a lot of people who bought our pack that like to flip our stuff on the marketplace, but also are just fans of our music and hold on to it with the idea that it'll become more valuable. And I love that overlap. Of course, in any industry like this, there's bad actors and there's people in it for the wrong reasons. But there's like, I was talking to somebody the other day about this. It's like scam artists have always existed. This is not a native to Web3 or crypto thing. Like when that wasn't a thing, you were getting like, Nigerian princes coming after you on email. Like every industry has had this forever. So I think that there's way more positive than there is negative, but like anything else, the negative just dominates the headline. So that's all people see.
Yeah, it's like cash isn't used for anything illegal ever, right? Like, it's like a new form, a new vehicle. Right. Well, I'm excited if, Instagram was testing out some different NFT integration, but like I'm looking forward to if you could have it be in your feed, like each comment could be a bid, or there's some visual way of having an auction in an Instagram live. It could be really exciting.
Super cool.
If it's integrated natively in the app, I think it could be really, really helpful.
I just get suspect about like Zuckerberg running my NFT collection, where it should be like decentralized, and they'll find a way to be like, no, you keep it in our wallet.
Right, decentralized, but with the middleman. Yeah.
I think they're going to do it because, the Instagram shop has been amazing, and they say, the first year, like, you don't pay any fees, but then it's 5% after the first year. So like all the quick tips decks I'm selling, like it works great in the platform, so you don't have to leave to check out of your cart or anything. But they're like, you got to pay up, you got to pay the piper after a year. Like they're taking it's not as bad as like the Apple Store or the App Store, but like taking 30%. But 5%, like they get you hooked, and they know it's effective for your business.
And it's 5% now, but the more hooked you are, they figure out how much they can push that.
You've been noticed. Yeah. We're going up to 7.5 now.
Yeah.
But how does it, I want to talk about that. I do need a bathroom break because I've gone through this much water already on this stream, and but I want to know more about the Instagram merch store and stuff, because we haven't really pushed into that, and I also think it would be beneficial for everybody watching. So I'm gonna dip out on this part for 2 minutes, and then I'll rewatch this stream to get your information. So
okay,
I'll be back, guys.
So have you mainly just used it for the quick tip cards, or had you used it for merch or anything like that?
Merch has never really worked for us. Like we haven't done it in terms of selling it direct on my website. Like it'd always be better at a show.
Yeah.
So when I do hard ticket shows, it'd be easier to have it in person, sign a shirt. But it's got this weird restriction where if you can't sell software. So it's almost like you had to kind of create a hardware product. So I was like, all right, well, let's make the card deck. So as soon as you have something printed that's made of atoms, it's like you're in business and you can sell something, which is so funny.
Interesting.
But that was really, and it's fun. It's interesting. Like the first order I did was 100 card decks, and I thought, that doesn't sound like much at all. Like I'll sign them all and send them out. And it's a lot of work when you're signing every single one. Like, it's like signing merch. These boxes come and it's way more stuff than you're expecting, like way heavier. But the whole process has been really cool. Like Shopify, I never knew how seamless that would be as a platform. Have you guys
Yeah.
messed around with that?
Not really, but do they do like the drop shipping where they'll handle all of that for you and it's not,
I
you
think
know
you
what I
can
mean?
do it. I did it all direct, but I think you could do, yeah, you could do the Amazon route with it. Like it would drop ship to, yeah, I think they offer a drop ship way, but that'd be nice. Yeah, direct to the customer because, yeah, mailing it out of the house. Like I drop off, the post
It,
office hates me here. I drop off the orders. I'm like, here you go.
exactly. It takes a lot of time, and that's the other thing is because Nick has done stuff like this where we've signed, sign stuff and send it out. And we did have something where we sent out about 100 things, and it's just time. And then if you let it go too long, you feel bad that people are waiting on it. Whereas like, it would be nice to just like get an order and it goes straight to them, and you're just cut
Yeah.
out of it, and it's efficient.
And it's batched. Yeah. Because otherwise you're doing like, because the orders kind of drip in like one here, two there.
Yeah,
you know.
exactly.
But that's the thing I loved is when I would do live chats, or you could pin the product to the live chat, so the Shopify would include in there, and then sell a couple units, and then you do another post, and you can see what is actually working. Like I think in our
Yeah.
industry, it's kind of refreshing to see cause and effect with something where it's much
Sure.
harder in the music world. You put a song out, like, did this lead to that? Like, did this booking come from putting out the single? Like, it's more of a cumulative effect of a bunch of different actions. So it's nice to see like this works, this doesn't. Like you can see your failures, you can see your successes, and you see it in the back end.
Yeah. Do you like looking at the back end, like on the music front? Do you look at your Spotify for artists and I don't know, whatever kind of stats you have access to? Do you like looking at that stuff?
I think it's good to check every now and then, not to obsess over.
Sure.
Like your monthly listeners is important. A lot of people use it as a yardstick to judge
Right.
your worth, but it is hilarious. Like that, there's guys like a lot of bass acts do much better with ticketing. They'll sell out Red Rocks, but they have a couple 100,000 listeners on Spotify or whatever. It's I don't know. It's I don't think there's a silver bullet anymore, and but you have to give something. So your team has to have some bullet points to shop. You have to have that story.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Same as whatever
As you know.
follower count on socials and that kind of stuff. I like looking at I think it's interesting on Spotify that they'll break out, per track. You can see if the streams are mostly coming from editorial playlists, which basically means they put you on and you're going to get a ton of passive listeners, or you can see if it got most of the plays are coming from people's saved music or from like the algorithmic radio stuff. And I feel like that's interesting because it can give you insights into, is this record working organically, or did you just luck out with like a playlist placement, and once that falls off, the track is over.
Yeah, and I think it's refreshing to see that it's not all reliant on the editorial, like someone picking
Yeah.
it for a big playlist. That used to be the be all end all, and it was like you'd beg Austin Kramer to, like Whit Morton would like wait outside his window playing a boombox, waiting for him to add his song to the playlist.
Right.
I love he like called him out. Did you see that whole thing? Like,
Yes, I did.
I couldn't tell if he was joking but it was like everybody would just be working this one contact before it was. I think it's probably multiple people at Spotify now, but probably a panel.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's on the live stream after this with me, called Dope or Nope, and talked to him about this a few times. But like we remember
Kramer's
when
on. Yeah.
yeah, he's in there.
Hey, Kramer.
When he was basically like inundated, he was the sole person handling all of dance music worldwide, and it was just running into him in Amsterdam, trying to have a conversation was absolutely impossible.
Impossible.
And like we were all homies before any of that, and it was just like he was just overwhelmed with music and people trying to like pitch stuff, and it was just I wouldn't have wanted that job ever.
No. No. Yeah, that's intense.
Crazy.
I wanted to get into like on the production side. Sorry, Nick will ask all the business questions, and then all I want to know about is the production.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. No doubt.
How do you like to sort of approach your productions? Say you're doing a remix or an original. Is there sort of like a go-to process that you always follow, or do you have a much more open? Like sometimes you start with chords, sometimes you have a drum loop and a groove. How do you approach things?
It's different every time depending on the song. Like if it's a challenging song that's at a really like a rock song that's at a different tempo and like at 80 BPM or something, and then the vocal's gonna sound like shit when you speed it up. It's gonna just chipmunk, especially if it has a lot of vibrato, things like that. So I really try to listen to the acapella first. And my typical process though is listen to the acapella, build like block piano chords around that. So get the chord voicings, get it, and I'm always like to make it more minor. There's some keys that just they flip flop between major and minor, and they sound weird. They sound too otherworldly, and I try to bring it into my world of keys that I like to work in, that'll translate well. And so I'll do those piano chords, and then I find a way to add, as I'm adding drums, I want to add more rhythmic interest to the chords. So I find a way to, obviously sidechain them, but chop them and gate them and have them be triggered in ways that are rhythmically interesting and pushes it along. So I try to see what I can do with those chords and leads to add rhythmic interest before adding tons of percussion. Because once you start filling everything out, you've got 4 loops and every hole is filled. You've got no groove anymore. So that's the typical process. I'll do a new lead. Maybe it's like a post-chorus tag that'll come in as a new voice that when the vocal leaves, that's the new lead that drops in. Depends on the song, and it is funny. Like I think I've always nailed it when I send the remix in, and sometimes it doesn't. It just doesn't work for the project, but it's funny. I started doing spec mixes early on, and that's a great way to get started. But it's frustrating when people are just doing a cattle call of, let's get 20 remixers and see what sticks.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and we've pushed probably after like our second remix that didn't get accepted, we realized and started telling everyone that like, all right, so now just make sure you're not using the same chords that were in the original, but take whatever you just worked on and figure out a way to use it somewhere else. And we've had records that have came out as originals where we tweaked it enough that there was nothing from the original there, but it was 100% the inspiration for, like, we built it around that, but just figured out a way to make it into something different.
Yeah, always recycle. You could recycle for parts or the whole thing, make a sample pack out of it. Never let it go to waste, never.
Yeah. Have you done a sample pack, like a commercial one, or are you talking about just like your private stash?
I keep a private stash, but I did one for Splice that was fun. I mean, it's always like those packs are so tedious, but it's super fun once you get into that mode. If you're just kind of greased into that, like, I'm making Serum presets, Inspire presets today. That's a fun way to do it. But I feel like that's still the best way to kind of up your production game, is just get better samples, and get someone else's samples who does it even better than you. That's instead of like defending your kick drum, just swap it out with something that's better. And sometimes it'll be like I'll hang on to parts, or I'm like, why am I holding on to the sample? I didn't even make it.
Right, you're just fighting for Oliver and Kashmir.
I will make this kick drum work.
Yep.
Yeah, we know a couple of the guys that work at Cymatics producing sounds for them, and it's pretty interesting to hear about their process. They like A&R every one shot that's going to go into a pack.
Wow.
Which is
so
just
much work.
It's so much. And these are guys that are like established producers. They just kind of do this behind the scenes and like be like, oh yeah, I submitted 100 kicks and only 3 got picked or 5 got picked.
Oh wow.
But
that's
I mean,
good,
like,
no
they're
filler,
Yeah, they're compensated for their time and everything, but it's still like that's pretty insane. The level of quality control that they have, but it speaks to the product. Like, their shit.
And I think that's what happens with synth presets, is that a lot of filler gets built into the factory banks because people are being paid by. Like, I had one company that was like, we'll give you the synth if you make 128 presets. I'm like, I'm not making 128 presets. I'm going to give you like 16 amazing ones.
Yes.
But like, that would take weeks. I mean, it would take like a month to get them all perfectly, like with macros, and have them be balanced and amazing. But
because it's a very different thing making a preset to be released commercially versus something that you would use on the regular. Because if you use it all the time and you know how it works, you don't need to clean it up or make it presentable. But yeah, those, when you get like I don't know, like Seven Skies does his Serum packs, and everything just works. You don't need to mess with it. Someone that doesn't know the synth can still like use it easily.
Or they get I think what happens a lot of times is you get guys building packs that don't tour or don't DJ, or they don't know like how to make these big high impact sounds. Like they're not in a genre. They make presets for a living completely, which is fine.
Yeah.
But like you can tell when an artist or somebody of touring caliber is making them, and you're like, oh, like Kashmir. It's like he can do it. He can teach and he can do it and make samples that work. But he's got a team,
Yeah, sure.
Of course. 2 real quick shout outs. Radio Dave said and I want to give this advice to everybody, and there's nothing wrong with it. He said he's been using the same kick drum for every label release so far, and to his credit, every record he's played for us has been different. We haven't noticed that, and every record's been different, but he's had a consistent sound in his records, which has been very identifiable from day one. He popped on the stream like at the beginning and started dropping music, and it's progressively gotten even better. And he's put out some stuff on our label, but nothing wrong with using the same kick drum on every record.
The only downside is that if you're mixing two of your songs together, you're going to get some phasing with the kicks, but that's it.
Sure.
So just make a little sandwich, with someone else's track and yours, and you're good.
Yeah. The other person I want to shout out is Mike Warner, who is watching on his TV our live stream right now.
Nice.
And he just sent me a picture of his 70-inch TV with all three of our faces on it. So
Nice.
Shout out to Mike Warner.
What do you guys use? I was going to ask you, because you have a very present, punchy sound. Like, what is your go-to set of plugins for getting stuff loud? And you like using Saturn and OTT, or crazy invisible limiter, things like that? What do you like?
Yeah, so we've always used like FabFilter plugins for I don't know, for everything, the EQs, the multi-band compressor, stuff like that. But otherwise, it's the same stuff that everyone uses. It's OTT, the multi-band compressor in Ableton, what else? Our mastering chain, and this is something we picked up from Wired because we've worked with them for a really long time. We produce into a mastering chain, so we have a strip that's always set up on there. And there's probably 1, 2, 3, 4. I think there's probably like 4 limiters or, harsh compression type things, all doing like a little bit of work. So It's not like we just send the whole thing and then boost the gain, 12 dB going into Pro L. It'll be like a little bit in Pro L and a little bit in Ozone and Sausage Fattener with 1% and OTT that's at like 5% or something to that effect, where they told us very early on, we kept sending like Hardwell records back during, like 2010, 2011. How do we get records to sound loud like Hardwell or punchy like Hardwell? And they were like, the only way to get it sounding loud and punchy is to do it sort of from the beginning, because it was like if you make balance out all of your elements without all this intense compression and limiting, and then try to do it after the fact, it doesn't quite ever lock into
Never
place.
gets loud enough.
Yeah, but if you go into it, then you sort of have the finished product as you go. And there's pros and cons to that. There's things like if you're pushing into this mastering chain really hard and you just want to make a little subtle change, like the level of the kick drum, you end up having to make much bigger changes because it's going into this intense processing. So it's sort of like an odd way of working. It takes getting used to, but we've just been doing it for so long that it's natural to us now.
I'm so curious because I know Hardwell masters all the stuff for Revealed still.
Yeah.
Like everyone else's releases. I'm like, what is he doing in there? And I remember he told me on his master, he just used the UAD precision limiter.
Oh, really?
And with, what did he have? And doesn't touch any of the knobs. And I was like, all right. You never know. Guys always like leave out like a few things in their chain, but I think that's so amazing that the label has almost all the releases just sound amazing.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how he's approaching that. Like, does he know visually, like, it's the spectrum looks like this, or this, it translates in mono, or what? But I'm always curious.
It is, well, it's interesting how, I don't know, there's so many different approaches to it. There are people that go very, very technical with it, and then there are other people that probably couldn't really explain their process, but they just nail it every time. And it's been interesting working, I don't know, Nick, like, I'm trying to think of like a less technical producer that whenever we work with them, we're like, how do you get it to sound like this? And it gets lost in translation. Like maybe Zach Martino.
Zach Martino for sure.
Zach's.
A lot of the guys in Fruity Loops.
Zach's.
Right.
Zach's latest single sounds amazing. That's
it
like,
is.
I'm going to put that in my mix references.
We worked with him a long time ago when he first kind of got connected with Tiesto and sort of like tried to help him boost his records, like just give them some polish. And it was actually very difficult because he came at it from such a different place that we had to wrap our heads around like where the record was at and where it needed to go versus a lot of times it's just sort of like accentuating what's there or something.
I was gonna say, what do you guys do with Finish My Track? Like, what do you see is the most common mistake with people with their mixes? Like too many layers or push too hard or what?
There's a couple ends of the spectrum. So like there's the guys who just have tons of great ideas and they throw the whole kitchen sink in the pot and it's like, this is awesome, but this is for another record. This section doesn't even sound like the rest of it, so get this out, use it on another record. So that's definitely like a segment of people. Most common stuff that I've seen, because Danny and I like split up the work, it just depends on what's coming in. Most common things I've seen are like the kick and bass issues and like using the right kick. So
like doing a long kick with a long bass by accident when it should be short kick, long bass.
Yep.
Yeah, or just like not a good quality sample. It just doesn't, like literally everything that surrounds the record is perfect, or at least like can be put in place the right way. But like the kick is just making the whole song sound unpolished. So sometimes it's a matter of swapping that and then balancing everything else around it. But I'd say those are the two most common things.
Yeah.
I always think it's funny where you can just put in a top kick sometimes, like this tiny, super filtered, and it just needed that little envelope, that little click to catch your ear.
Yep.
To keep time, you know? Like sometimes it's as simple as that, and then other times it just sounds phasey and shitty, and you need a better kick. Overall.
The other trick I love to do, which is similar to the top kick, is that little like reverse sweep white noise into the transient. I think I picked that up on a like a Tom Starr Future Music video like 8 years ago or something. And sometimes that makes the difference where you get that rhythm, the click, but you don't worry about the phasey thing because it's happening before the actual kick, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. I think it's always a hard balance, right? Like with the side chaining, where because you can overdo the side chaining and then it's all just kick, or like and doing multi-band side chaining. Do you guys do a lot of that?
Sometimes it depends. A lot of times, like I have racks set up in Ableton where I can do it pretty easily, but I'm not good about. I end up doing lots of instances of side chaining, LFO tool or volume shaper. And it gets confusing on all these different instances if I'm trying to like dial in if it's supposed to be, 100% on the lows and then a little bit on the highs, and I end up losing track of it. I know it's a different thing. A lot of bass guys will just send all of their, non-percussive elements to one bus and duck it there, and then it's a lot easier.
Elenium was saying he just uses the stock Ableton compressor, but he puts two of them.
Oh, really?
And he just slams it. He's like, one is not enough, like with the threshold all the way down.
Yeah, because he does have like crazy separation between the kick and the rest of the elements.
Yeah, it's almost like he's chopping the waveform out
of
the whole signal.
That's really interesting.
That's wild. It's cool too, like with there being two of us, it's like Danny was working on something and then he's like, all right, give me feedback. And it was like stuff that if we weren't together, like kind of A-Bing it would be hard for me to just like dissect it all and like give him feedback, but then like have him bounce it back out for me to hear. So it's cool just like taking the session from each other and kind of approaching it in a totally different way. So like did that yesterday on a record.
Finish our own track.
Yeah, the balance that I came up with for the record was totally different than what he had, almost too much so. So now I'm like rebouncing those masters, so they're like somewhere between. But it is kind of cool just from like a mix perspective to get that separation of ideas. And we had that experience with Wired and some other mixing houses, mastering houses, where they sent something back where we were like, I don't know if I like this. And then you sit with it for a little while. Yeah, but like they ultimately were good decisions for the record. So it's always cool to hear.
Yeah.
Somebody Moniker asked, what are your thoughts on volume shaper kickstart versus something like Ableton's native compressor?
Well, I love the volume shaper. What do I use? Shaper box.
Shaper box is cool.
I think there's more control, like, and you get less clicking, and the stock compressor is handy. I really like Track Spacer is nice sometimes if I want not less of a pumping effect, but more of like just a lead moving out of the way of a vocal or usually those are just arrangement decisions that I'm delaying, and I just need to like remove a layer and not be sidechaining it. But you know,
I think at the end of the day, it really comes down to what you can work with the most comfortably. And we talk about this all the time. There's a million ways to do every different, part of the creative process. There's so many different ways that you can tackle it. And honestly, whatever works the quickest is just the most intuitive for you is the way that you should do it. So it's like if you have LFO tool figured out, you don't need to go learn Shaperbox or Ableton's native compressor to do the exact same thing.
yeah, I'm always amazed where I think someone's using the latest sidechaining plugin and it's the stock, like Elenium, it's like they're using the stock thing, and different people use tools in different ways where they'll get crazy results from some obscure plugin and I'm like, I just don't hear it. Like some guys love Decapitator, the Sound Toys distortion plugin, and
Yep.
most things I put it on, it just doesn't work. I love Saturn. Saturn is the way I like to distort stuff, and just everything sounds better. I'll put it on almost every bus now.
Oh, interesting.
Wow.
I do have to leave for the airport in a little bit, but maybe we take a couple more questions, or if anybody has,
let's do that.
questions about the tips, about the card deck.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
So I know you guys touched on it when I was off of here. So the primary way you're selling those is through Instagram, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And it's also on your website shop.
Yeah, if you go to mpquicktips.com/cards, it's on there. But yeah, it's like these are all my favorite tips, like things that have worked for me for doing music for over 20 years, and just things I didn't want to forget, so I wouldn't repeat the same mistakes over and over. But just about getting into that creative flow, and just having something tangible to trigger these ideas instead of watching a 30-minute tutorial on YouTube. Like there's enough. I felt like there's enough online about how to get a fat kick drum or master or mix.
This is a different angle.
Yeah, it's more holistic. It's more of a philosophical approach, like getting into the core of like a lot of it is workflow too. Just having things color coded in the studio, getting all the plumbing done ahead of time so you can be creative and stay in that state.
Yeah,
so it's been an exciting project. Yeah.
Guys, go pick those cards up, and then talk us through Patreon. Like, what levels do you have on there, and how can people support you on there?
Yeah, people can go to patreon.com/MorganPage, and a lot of people who watch the live stream tune in on there because I give them a version that's copyright free, copyright takedown free. So I put everything on Vimeo, then they get a private link for that. So that's been cool. There's also track mentorship, so I'll give people feedback on tracks, and sometimes I feature tracks from the Patreon producers. So there's also sample packs, mashups, and every version, every episode of the show. And then we give tickets for shows away on there as well. So VIP tickets.
Oh wow.
Oh, well, you're really like pushing into it heavy. That's awesome.
Yeah. It's nice because it's like you can keep it in a manageable size where I can really like super serve these fans rather than trying to be everything to 500,000 people.
Yeah, that's great. So definitely go support Morgan, buy the cards, sign up for Patreon. Thanks so much, man, for coming on today. Really appreciate it. And
it was a good chat.
You're a legend. You've definitely inspired us quite a bit, both on the DJ side and also the production side, and obviously with what you're doing with the quick tips. I know some guys have probably seen some of the sound bites we've been putting up, but definitely inspired by what you're doing. And thank you for pushing the scene forward.
Yeah, and I love the new tracks are sounding amazing. I just played the last single on Sirius, I think like last week or the week before. So
thank you.
As always, I'm a fan.
That's
Appreciate
awesome.
It, man.
Yeah.
All right, man.
All right, guys. Thanks for having me.
Ladies and gentlemen, Morgan Page, make some noise.
Later, man. Thank you.
Yeah.
Later. He's awesome.
Yeah, nice. Good chat. We could have kept going. For sure. I saw when I was like looking through his socials and stuff, I saw he had a gig tonight. And I was like, oh man.
Yeah, that's
busy guy.
Yeah, that's awesome. Real quick, next weekend.